Ever get that feeling like someone's watching you online?
Yeah.
Or worse, that they might be like in your bank account.
Oh, yeah.
You and everyone else, probably.
Yeah.
That's why we're going to take a deep dive into the world of hacker groups today. Our guide is this article from Cobalt, a cybersecurity company. It's called Top 10 Most Notorious Hacker Groups in History.
Okay.
So we'll hit the highlights, like what these groups actually do, their motivations, their biggest moves, that kind of thing.
Right.
Think of it as your, like, crash course in cybercrime, but hopefully without the, actual crashing.
Right. That's a good way to put it. And it's really important to remember that these groups, they run the gamut. So you've got, like, hacktivists on one end.
Right.
You have government-backed on the other end. And then some are just straight-up criminals.
Got it.
The whole spectrum.
So let's set the stage a bit. Why do these groups even exist in the first place?
Well, it boils down to the fact that our lives are just increasingly intertwined with technology.
Right.
And the internet. So wherever there's power and information, there's always going to be someone who wants to exploit it.
Makes sense.
And whether that's for money, political influence, or just the thrill of the challenge.
Yeah. Okay. So are there like different types of hackers out there?
Absolutely. So the ones that we're mostly going to be talking about today, these are the black hat hackers.
Okay.
These are the folks who engage in illegal activities.
Right.
But there are actually other types of hackers too, like white hat hackers.
White hat?
They use their skills for good.
Ah, interesting.
Companies actually hire them to test their systems and find vulnerabilities.
So it's kind of like the good guys versus the bad guys, huh?
It is. But today we're going to be focusing on the bad guys, the black hats.
Okay. I'm ready to go to the dark side. Let's start with a group that's practically a household name. I feel like everyone's heard of Anonymous.
Right?
They're the ones with the Guy Fawkes masks, right?
Yes. Anonymous is actually a really fascinating case because they're what's known as a decentralized collective. There's no real leader or hierarchy.
Wow.
So it makes them incredibly difficult to track or prosecute.
That makes sense, yeah. So anyone can basically claim to be part of Anonymous.
Pretty much, yeah. And that adds to their mystique, I think.
I bet. So what are their goals? What are they actually trying to achieve?
Well, Anonymous is all about hacktivism.
Okay.
They believe in using hacking as a tool for, social and political change.
So it's like activism, but in the digital world.
Exactly. And their actions, they usually revolve around causes like freedom of speech, government transparency, fighting censorship, those kinds of things.
Interesting. So they're like digital activists.
You could say that, yeah. And their tactics, it could be anything from like shutting down websites to leaking sensitive information.
Okay, I remember hearing about like DDoS attacks. Is that something they do?
Yeah, a DDoS attack, it stands for Distributed Denial of Service. What they do is they flood a website with so much traffic that it basically crashes.
Wow, that's pretty powerful.
And when they leak information, it's usually coming from organizations that they see as corrupt or oppressive in their view.
Okay. I feel like they've been involved in some pretty high-profile events, right? Like, what would you say was their biggest move?
There's been a lot. One of their most famous was called Operation Payback.
Operation Payback.
It targeted companies like PayPal, Visa, and MasterCard.
And why those companies?
Well, it was after those companies stopped processing donations for WikiLeaks.
Ah, right.
They also played a big role in the Arab Spring uprisings,
Yeah.
providing tools and support to protesters.
Wow, so they've actually had a real impact on world events. That's pretty incredible. Okay, but now things are going to get a little more serious. Let's talk about government-backed groups. I'm guessing their motives are a little different.
You could say that. These groups are usually involved in cyber espionage. So think stealing information, disrupting infrastructure, trying to gain a strategic advantage over other countries.
Oh, wow.
It can have pretty major geopolitical consequences.
Yeah, I bet. The article mentioned Fancy Bear, Lazarus Group, and Equation Group as some of the most notorious. Let's start with Fancy Bear. Who are they?
Fancy Bear, they're believed to be linked to the GRU, Russia's military intelligence agency.
Okay.
They've been active for years, targeting governments, defense contractors, media outlets, pretty much anyone they see as a threat or a source of valuable information.
And weren't they the ones behind the Democratic National Committee hack during the 2016 U.S. election?
That's right. They used some pretty sophisticated malware to infiltrate the systems and steal data, things like Xagent and Xtunnel.
Wow, it sounds like the stuff of spy movies.
Yeah.
Okay, so if Fancy Bear is Russia, then Lazarus Group would be North Korea.
You got it. Lazarus Group, they're North Korea's cyber army, and they're known for their destructive attacks. They're not as interested in espionage. They're more focused on causing, disruption and damage.
I've heard about them. Didn't they, hack Sony Pictures over that movie, The Interview?
Yeah, that was them. They were furious about the film's portrayal of Kim Jong-un and launched a pretty devastating attack, leaked a ton of sensitive data.
Wow.
And they were also behind the WannaCry ransomware attack.
WannaCry? What was that?
It affected hundreds of thousands of computers worldwide.
Okay, so hold on. What exactly is ransomware?
It's a type of malware that encrypts the files on a computer system.
So you can't access them?
Exactly. And then the attackers, they demand a ransom payment, usually in cryptocurrency,
okay.
to decrypt the files. So basically holding your data hostage.
That's terrifying. All right, so we've got Russia, North Korea. What about Equation Group? Who are they connected to?
Equation Group is widely believed to be linked to the NSA. That's the United States National Security Agency.
Oh, wow.
They're known for using incredibly advanced malware and exploiting what are called zero-day vulnerabilities.
Zero-day vulnerabilities. Okay, back up for a second. What's that?
It's basically a flaw in software that the developers don't even know about yet.
Oh, wow.
Which means there's no patch or fix available.
So they're super vulnerable.
It makes it a prime target for hackers. The Equation Group was allegedly involved in Stuxnet, a sophisticated worm that targeted Iran's nuclear facilities. Some consider it one of the most complex and impactful cyber weapons ever deployed.
Wow. So essentially, the U.S. has its own cyber army.
You could say that, yeah.
This is getting pretty intense. We've covered hacktivists, government-backed groups, but what about, the hackers who are just in it for the money? Like the cyber criminals.
Yes, the profit-driven hackers. There are some big players out there, and their methods are constantly changing too.
Yeah.
We're talking about groups like Carbanak, DarkSide, and TA505.
Yeah.
Made headlines for their really sophisticated attacks and their massive financial hauls.
Okay, so how do they actually make money? Like, how do you profit from hacking?
Well, there are a few common ways they do it. Stealing financial data.
Okay, so like credit card numbers and stuff?
Yeah, exactly. Launching ransomware attacks, which we just talked about.
Right.
And selling stolen information on the dark web.
Ah, the dark web, the hidden underbelly of the internet.
That's right.
Okay. Let's start with Carbanak. What makes them stand out?
Well, Carbanak, they're an Eastern European group that specialized in attacking banks.
Okay.
And they were incredibly skilled at combining social engineering with malware and even ATM manipulation.
Social engineering, that's like tricking people into giving up information, right?
Exactly. It's manipulation at its finest.
So they're not just like tech wizards, they're like master manipulators too.
Exactly. They infiltrate a bank system, they learn the inner workings, and then they just siphon off funds without raising any immediate red flags.
So they're like ghosts in the system.
Pretty much. And they're talking about over $1 billion stolen from financial institutions worldwide.
$1 billion with a B? That's insane. And they've been like expanding their targets, right?
Yeah. In recent years, they started targeting retail and hospitality businesses too.
Oh, no.
That means compromising those point of sale systems and stealing credit card data from places we shop and eat at every day.
So it's not just big banks that are vulnerable. This is starting to hit a little too close to home. Okay, what about DarkSide? I feel like I've heard that name before.
You probably have. They actually operated using a ransomware as a service model.
Ransomware as a service?
Yeah, it's like a franchise for cybercrime.
A franchise? Like McDonald's, but for ransomware?
It's a good analogy.
Yeah.
So they create the ransomware tools, and then they share them with affiliates who actually carry out the attacks.
Interesting.
And, they claim to have some ethical guidelines. Like, they said they wouldn't target hospitals, schools, or nonprofits. But their actions, well, they told a bit of a different story. They were behind the Colonial Pipeline attack, which caused those major fuel shortages on the East Coast.
Right, that was huge. So their ethics kind of went out the window when there was a big payday involved.
It seems that way, yeah.
Are they still active?
Well, after that Colonial Pipeline attack, they announced they were shutting down.
Okay.
But a lot of cybersecurity experts believe that they just rebranded, that they're still operating under a different name.
Ah, so they could be back at any time.
Potentially. Yeah, you never really know with these groups.
Okay, last but not least, tell me about TA505.
TA505, also known as Evil Corp.
Okay.
Another group primarily focused on financial gain. They've been active in the U.S., U.K., and Germany.
Okay.
And their main targets, financial institutions.
Okay.
They use their infamous Dridex banking Trojan.
Okay, another tech term. What's a banking Trojan?
Basically, it's a type of malware designed to steal your banking credentials and financial data.
Ah, so that's how they get you.
Exactly. And they spread Dridex using what are called spear phishing campaigns.
Spear phishing. Okay, I've heard of phishing, but what's spear phishing?
So phishing is when you get those emails that look like they're from a trusted source,
Yeah.
trying to trick you into clicking on malicious links.
Right.
Spear phishing is a more targeted form of that. So they might send an email that looks like it's from your bank or even from a colleague.
Oh, wow.
And it's designed to trick specific individuals into giving up sensitive info.
So that email from my bank asking me to update my password, that could actually be a trap.
It's possible. That's why it's so important to be cautious.
Yeah.
Never click on links or open attachments from unknown or suspicious sources.
Right.
TA505 is a perfect example of how these cyber criminals, they can really exploit human error.
Yeah, I'm starting to see that. Okay, so we've covered anonymous, government-backed groups, and now these like cyber criminal masterminds. Are there any other types of hacker groups we should know about?
There are. And some of them are even more interesting because they operate in very specific niches using really unique tactics, and they're going after like very specific types of data.
Oh, this is getting good. Tell me more.
They really are fascinating.
Yeah, those groups with the unique tactics and targets. So like before we jump to the break, I was really ready to hear more about that.
Okay, well, let's start with the Dark Overlords.
Okay.
They're less like your typical hackers.
Okay.
They're more like I guess you could say like a digital mafia. They specialize in stealing sensitive data, and then they blackmail their victims.
Oh, wow. So they're not after like money directly. They're more about using that data as leverage.
That's right. They're extortionists.
Yeah.
They threaten to release the stolen information publicly unless they get a hefty ransom.
That's ruthless. What kind of targets are we talking about here?
Well, they've gone after everyone from Hollywood studios to healthcare providers to schools. Remember that Netflix leak a while back where episodes of Orange is the New Black were released online?
Oh, yeah.
That was the Dark Overlord.
Wow, I remember that. So they're not afraid to go after like big names. They're clearly willing to cause some serious damage.
Right. And what's even more disturbing is that they've targeted healthcare providers and schools, stealing sensitive patient and student information.
Oh, gosh.
Imagine the chaos they could cause by releasing that kind of data.
Yeah, that's scary. How do they even get their hands on this information in the first place? Are they just like incredibly skilled hackers?
Well, they are, but they also use a combination of, social engineering,
Okay.
malware, and even exploit those zero-day vulnerabilities that we talked about earlier.
Right.
They're like ghosts in the machine. They can slip in and out of systems without leaving a trace.
That's incredible and terrifying.
It is.
So they're a nightmare for law enforcement, I imagine.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because they're so good at covering their tracks and operating across borders.
Yeah.
Catching them is really, really difficult.
Let's move on to the next group. Morpho. They sound like a bit of a mystery.
They are. We know they're really skilled.
Okay.
And they're focused on stealing intellectual property.
Yeah.
But their origins, their exact location, it's largely unknown.
Intellectual property. So we're talking about like blueprints for new technology, secret formulas, that sort of thing.
Exactly. They've successfully breached companies like Microsoft, Apple, Twitter, and Facebook,
Wow.
stealing valuable data and trade secrets.
So they're basically like digital thieves.
Stealing the crown jewels of the tech world.
How do they manage to get into these like high security systems? It seems impossible.
Well, like the Dark Overlords, they're masters of exploiting those zero-day vulnerabilities.
Okay.
They also develop like custom-built malware,
Right.
and they use social engineering to slip past those security measures.
It's like they're always one step ahead.
It does seem that way. The fact that they can remain undetected for so long within these systems
Yeah.
really shows how skilled they are, how sophisticated their approach is.
So it's a constant game of cat and mouse for the companies.
Yeah, you could say that, but with incredibly high stakes.
Oh, yeah, I bet. Okay, on to our last group in this category, Lapsus. They seem to be pretty different from the Dark Overlord or Morpho.
You're right. Lapsus is known for being, well, incredibly brazen and attention-seeking.
Okay.
They don't shy away from the spotlight. In fact, I think they love it.
I think I read that they used Telegram, the messaging app, to communicate with their victims and even recruit new members.
Yeah, that's right. They had a public channel with like Tens of thousands of subscribers.
Yeah.
They'd brag about their exploits, post snippets of stolen data, even taunt their victims.
So they're like the internet trolls of the hacking world.
There's definitely an element of that, yeah.
Yeah.
They seem to, I guess you could say, thrive on the chaos and the disruption they caused.
What kind of targets did they go after?
It was all over the map. They hit tech giants like Microsoft and NVIDIA, ride-sharing companies like Uber,
Okay.
and even gaming companies like Rockstar Games.
Wait, Rockstar Games, the ones who make Grand Theft Auto. Did they steal the source code for GTA 6?
They did, yeah. It was a major incident.
Yeah.
Caused quite a stir in the gaming industry.
I bet. So how did they manage to pull off all these hacks? What makes them so effective?
Well, they use a combination of techniques, including social engineering,
Okay.
malware, and something called MFA fatigue.
Okay, you've mentioned MFA fatigue before. Can you remind me what that is?
Sure. Multi-factor authentication, or MFA, is that security measure that requires you to provide multiple forms of identification before you can access an account.
Okay.
So entering a code from your phone in addition to your password.
Right. I use that for a lot of my accounts.
It's a good security practice, but Lapsus figured out a way to exploit it.
Oh, no.
They'd bombard users with tons of MFA requests,
Oh, wow.
hoping they would eventually get tired of entering codes and just approve the login attempt.
So they were hoping that people would get annoyed and let their guard down.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a tactic that really preys on human psychology.
It's pretty clever.
It is. And here's the most ironic part. The alleged mastermind behind this brazen group, a teenager.
Seriously, a teenager.
Yep, 16 years old.
Wow.
It's a good reminder that cyber criminals can come from anywhere.
Yeah.
And that age is no barrier to entry in this world.
That's crazy. Okay, so we've explored all these fascinating groups, their unique tactics, their targets, and honestly, I'm feeling a little vulnerable right now.
I can understand that.
What does the future hold for cybersecurity? How can we stay ahead of all these, ever-evolving threats?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
And it's a challenge that keeps cybersecurity professionals up at night
Yeah.
because the threats are constantly changing and the bad guys, well, they're always come up with new ways to exploit our systems and our data.
Mm-hmm.
But there are steps we can take to protect ourselves.
Okay, let's talk solutions.
Yeah.
What can companies do to strengthen their defenses?
Well, the first step is to actually take cybersecurity seriously. It needs to be a top priority, not just an afterthought. So that means investing in robust security measures, things like strong passwords,
Right.
multi-factor authentication, and regular security updates.
Okay. But I bet a lot of companies still see cybersecurity as an expense, not an investment.
You're right, and that's a mistake.
Yeah.
As we've seen with all these hacker groups, the cost of a data breach or a ransomware attack can be way greater than the cost of prevention.
Oh, yeah, for sure. What about employee training? Isn't that a big part of it too?
Absolutely. Because employees are often the weakest link in the chain. They need to be trained to, spot those phishing emails,
Okay.
avoid suspicious links, and practice good cyber hygiene.
So it's about creating a culture of cybersecurity within an organization.
Exactly. Everyone needs to be aware of the risks and their role in mitigating those risks.
All right, so that's for companies. But what about individuals, like you and me? What can we do to protect ourselves online?
A lot of the same principles apply, actually.
Yeah.
Use strong, unique passwords for each of your accounts.
Okay.
Enable that multi-factor authentication.
Right.
And just be really careful about what you click on and what you download.
So it's all about common sense.
Common sense goes a long way, yeah.
Yeah.
Be skeptical of unsolicited emails, especially ones that are asking for, for personal information or that contain attachments you weren't expecting.
Okay. And what about social media? Any tips for staying safe on those platforms?
Be mindful of what information you share publicly.
Okay.
Avoid posting details that could be used to answer security questions or guess your passwords.
Right.
And be wary of connecting with people you don't know in real life.
So no posting pictures of my dog with his name tag visible.
Probably a good idea. Cyber criminals, they often use fake profiles to gain your trust and then exploit you.
It's scary to think about, but it seems like the hackers always have the upper hand. They're always one step ahead.
It can feel that way, yeah. But it's important to remember that cybersecurity is an ongoing process. It's a digital arms race.
Ah, okay.
The hackers are always developing new tactics, and we have to keep up.
So it's a constant back and forth battle.
It is. And the stakes are getting higher all the time. That's why companies like like Cobalt are so important.
Okay.
They're constantly researching these new threats, developing new defenses,
Right.
and helping companies identify their vulnerabilities through penetration testing.
Penetration testing. Can you remind me what that is again and why it's so important?
Of course. Penetration testing, or pen testing, it's basically ethical hacking.
Okay.
Companies hired these skilled security professionals to simulate real-world attacks on their systems.
Hmm.
And this helps identify those vulnerabilities before the bad guys can exploit them.
So it's like a controlled experiment to see how strong their defenses really are.
Exactly. And it's becoming an essential part of a, comprehensive cybersecurity strategy.
Okay, this is all starting to make sense, but I have to ask, why is Cobalt writing about these hacker groups in the first place?
Well, because knowledge is power.
Right.
The more we understand about these groups, their motivations, their tactics, the better equipped we are to defend against them.
So it's like studying your opponent's playbook.
Precisely. By understanding how these hackers think and operate, we can develop strategies to protect against their attacks.
So we've learned about all these different hacker groups, their motivations, their targets, and their tactics. What are the bigger takeaways here?
I think the most important takeaway is that the cyber threat landscape is incredibly diverse.
Yeah.
And it's constantly evolving. We're not just talking about, teenage pranksters anymore.
Right.
These are sophisticated organizations with significant resources.
And they're all after something.
Right. Whether it's data, disruption, or dollars.
Yeah.
And they're willing to go to great lengths to get what they want. That's why cybersecurity has become so critical for everyone. Individuals, businesses, governments.
So what does the future hold? I mean, how do we win this digital arms race?
Well, I wish I had a crystal ball. But the only certainty is that the threat will continue to evolve.
Okay.
Hackers will, they'll become even more sophisticated. They'll use new technologies like AI to their advantage.
Oh.
And they'll constantly be searching for new ways to exploit our vulnerabilities.
So it sounds like we're in for a wild ride.
We are. But I'm optimistic. We have incredibly talented people working in cybersecurity. We're developing better tools, better technologies all the time.
Okay.
And most importantly, we're becoming more aware of the risks. And that awareness is crucial.
So what can we do, both as individuals and as a society to prepare for this future?
Well, it's all about staying informed, being proactive, and working together.
Okay.
So individuals, they need to practice that good cyber hygiene. Use those strong passwords. Be wary of those phishing scams. Think twice before clicking on a suspicious link.
Right.
Companies, they need to prioritize cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Invest in those robust security measures.
Okay.
And governments, well, they need to work together on a global level to combat cybercrime and develop those international regulations.
It sounds like a multi-pronged approach is needed here.
Exactly. It's a shared responsibility. Cybersecurity isn't just the job of tech experts or law enforcement. It's something we all need to be engaged in.
All right. So in this part, we've really gone deep into the tactics of these unique groups. But now I'm curious, what does all of this actually mean for our world? Like, what are the bigger implications of all this hacking?
Yeah, we've been unpacking all these different hacker groups and their methods, but it's time to zoom out a bit. What are the larger implications of all this activity?
Yeah.
What does this mean for our world, not just our laptops? That's a great question. And it takes us beyond just, stolen data or hacked websites.
Yeah.
We're talking about, ethical dilemmas,
Okay.
legal challenges, even threats to national security.
Okay.
It's a lot bigger than many people realize.
So let's start with the ethical side of things. Is there ever a situation where, hacking is justified, even if it's, for something like freedom of speech or a social cause?
That's where things get really tricky. It's a gray area. Some people argue that hacking can be a legitimate form of protest,
Okay.
especially in places where those traditional forms of dissent are shut down.
Right.
Imagine a country with a really repressive regime where speaking out against the government could land you in prison.
Yeah.
So in those cases, hacking could be a way to, give a voice to those who can't speak freely.
Right. To kind of level the playing field.
Exactly. But even then, there's always the risk of causing unintended harm. Hacking, even with good intentions, can disrupt essential services. It can expose personal data. It can even damage critical infrastructure.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. It's a tough line to walk. Okay, so what about the legal side of things? What laws are in place to actually punish hackers, and are they effective?
Well, most countries have laws against unauthorized access to computer systems and the theft of data.
Okay.
The problem is these hacker groups they're very good at covering their tracks.
Right.
And they operate across international borders.
Yeah.
So even if you can track them down, bringing them to justice is a whole other challenge.
So it's like a jurisdictional nightmare.
Exactly. International cooperation is essential, but it can be very slow and complicated.
Right.
And sometimes these groups operate from countries that either, turn a blind eye to cybercrime or they even harbor these hackers.
Yeah. Oh, wow. We talked earlier about government-backed hacker groups. They're engaged in espionage and cyber warfare. But can groups that aren't, tied to a nation still pose a serious threat to national security?
Oh, absolutely. Non-state actors, they can disrupt critical infrastructure,
Okay.
steal sensitive military technology or intelligence, and even sow discord and chaos within a country.
So they could interfere with elections,
Mhm.
spread disinformation,
Yep.
create widespread panic, that kind of thing.
Precisely.
Yeah.
In today's, interconnected world, the lines between cybercrime and national security, they're blurring.
Yeah.
It's not just about protecting data and systems anymore. It's about protecting our way of life.
It sounds like we're facing a whole new era of warfare, one that's, fought in the digital realm.
It's a different kind of battlefield.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the stakes are, they're just as high,
Yeah.
if not higher. And the potential for damage is immense.
So we've talked about ethical dilemmas, legal challenges, threats to national security. But what does the future hold? How does this all play out?
Well, if I had a crystal ball, I'd be a very rich man. But one thing's for sure, the threat will continue to evolve.
Okay.
Hackers will continue to develop new tools, new techniques.
Mm-hmm.
They'll become even more sophisticated.
Yeah.
And they'll find new ways to exploit our vulnerabilities.
So it's like a never-ending arms race.
Pretty much, yeah. And as technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning become more advanced,
Mm-hmm.
both hackers and cybersecurity professionals are going to be using those to their advantage.
So AI is it's kind of a double-edged sword.
It is. It can be used for good or for evil.
This all sounds pretty daunting. Is there any hope?
Absolutely, there's hope.
What?
While the challenges are, they are significant, I'm optimistic. We have brilliant minds working in cybersecurity. We're constantly developing better tools, better technologies.
Okay.
And perhaps most importantly, we're becoming more aware of the risks, and that awareness is crucial.
So what can we do, both as individuals and as a society to prepare for this future?
Well, it's all about staying informed, being proactive, and working together.
Okay.
Individuals, they need to practice good cyber hygiene,
Right.
using those strong passwords,
Mm-hmm.
being wary of those phishing scams, and thinking twice before clicking on, those suspicious links.
Okay.
Companies need to prioritize cybersecurity and invest in those robust security measures. And governments, they need to cooperate globally to combat cybercrime and establish clear international regulations.
Sounds like a team effort is required.
It does.
Wow.
It's a shared responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Cybersecurity isn't just the job of tech experts or law enforcement. It's something we all need to be engaged in.
Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Yeah.
We started by exploring these notorious hacker groups.
Right.
Their motivations and their tactics, and then we
Yeah.
moved on to the bigger picture, the implications for our world.
Yeah, our ethics,
Yeah.
our laws, even our national security.
We've seen how these groups operate, the damage they can cause and the challenges we face in combating them.
It's true.
But we've also, I think, seen reasons for hope.
We have.
We've talked about the importance of awareness, education, proactive security measures, global cooperation.
Mhm.
And I have to say I'm feeling a bit more empowered, not just overwhelmed.
That's good. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to cybersecurity.
Okay.
The more we understand about the threats we face,
Yeah.
the better equipped we are to protect ourselves.
This has been an incredibly informative deep dive.
It has.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
It's been my pleasure.
And to everyone listening, remember, stay vigilant, stay informed, and stay safe out there in the digital world.